The darkness of space stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by distant stars that looked like scattered diamonds. Deep in Sector Theta 7, where no human had ever traveled before, something waited in the cold vacuum. Diana Ross adjusted her grip on the command chair's armrest as she studied the massive shape on the main screen. 20 years of deep space exploration had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now every instinct screamed danger. The alien vessel floating before them dwarfed their own ship like a whale next to a minnow. "How big is that thing?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease crawling up her spine. Ben Clark looked up from his scanner readings, pushing his thick glasses higher on his nose. "Best estimate puts it at 12 kilometers long, maybe 15. The hull composition is unlike anything in our databases." Amy Steele crossed her arms and frowned at the screen. Her security training made her see threats everywhere, but this felt different. Worse. "Captain, I recommend we maintain distance and report this to command. We're not equipped to handle something this size." Rick Stone turned from his pilot console, excitement dancing in his young eyes. "Come on, Amy, when will we get another chance like this? Think about what we could learn." Diana studied the readings scrolling across her personal display. The ship appeared dead. No energy signatures, no movement, no response to their hails. But something about its design made her skin crawl. The hull curved in ways that hurt to look at, covered in what appeared to be scratches or bite marks. "Dr. Clark, any signs of life over there?" Ben shook his head. "Nothing on biological scanners. But Captain, the technology readings are off the charts. Whatever built this ship was centuries ahead of us. Maybe millennia." Diana weighed her options. Protocol demanded they report the discovery and wait for a proper research vessel. But that could take months, and by then another exploration team might claim the find. The scientific value alone could advance human technology by decades. "Amy, prep a boarding team. Full environmental suits, heavy weapons, emergency beacons." Amy's jaw tightened. "Captain, with respect, this feels like a mistake." "Noted, but we didn't come out here to play it safe." "Rick, bring us to docking distance. Nice and slow." As their ship approached the alien vessel, details became clearer on the screen. The hull wasn't just scratched, it looked gnawed. Deep gouges ran along its surface like claw marks, some large enough to drive a ground vehicle through. Whatever had attacked this ship had been thorough. The boarding party assembled in the shuttle bay 30 minutes later. Diana led the team herself, flanked by Amy, Ben, and 3 security officers. Their magnetic boots clanked against the deck plating as they made final equipment checks. "Remember, we're explorers first," Diana said into her helmet comm. "Document everything. Touch nothing until Ben clears it, and stay together. If anything feels wrong, we abort immediately." The airlock on the alien ship opened with surprising ease, as if it had been designed for their docking clamps. Emergency lighting flickered along the corridors, casting twisted shadows that seemed to move on their own. Ben's scanner beeped constantly as they moved deeper into the ship. "Atmospheric composition is compatible with our suits, but I'm reading trace elements I can't identify. The gravity feels Earth normal somehow." The corridors stretched in directions that defied logic, curving up and around in ways that made Diana's inner ear protest. Alien writing covered the walls in symbols that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. "Captain," one of the security officers called from ahead, "you need to see this." They entered what must have been the ship's main deck, a vast space filled with workstations and control panels. Everything was pristine except for one detail that made Diana's blood run cold. Bones, scattered everywhere. Clean white bones picked completely free of flesh, lying in piles around each workstation. Not human bones, the skulls were too elongated, the rib cages too wide, but clearly the remains of an intelligent species. "Whatever did this was thorough," Amy whispered, her weapon raised despite the apparent emptiness of the ship. Ben knelt beside one of the bone piles, his scanner working overtime. No blast marks, no weapon residue, no signs of violence. "It's like something just consumed all the organic matter and left the bones behind." Diana felt the hair on her neck stand up despite her environmental suit. "How long ago?" "Hard to say. Could be weeks, could be years. The preservation in vacuum makes dating difficult." A soft scratching sound echoed through the chamber like claws on metal. Everyone froze, weapons turning toward the source of the noise. "Did you hear that?" Rick's voice cracked slightly over the comm. The scratching came again, this time from a different direction. Then another, and another. Soon the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. From the walls, From the ceiling, from the ventilation shafts that lined the upper reaches of the chamber. "We're leaving. Now." Diana's command voice cut through the team's growing panic. But as they turned toward the exit, the scratching grew louder, closer, and in the flickering emergency lights, something moved in the shadows of the ventilation grates, something small and quick and very much alive. Amy grabbed Diana's arm. "Captain, whatever's in here, it's been waiting." The first creature emerged from a ceiling vent with fluid grace, dropping silently to the deck 20 meters away. In the dim light, it looked almost cute, about the size of a large cat covered in dark fur with bright eyes that reflected the emergency lighting. Then it opened its mouth, revealing rows of metallic teeth, and made a sound like a buzzsaw cutting through steel. "Run," Diana whispered. More creatures poured from the vents like a living waterfall, dozens of them moving with terrifying coordination. They didn't charge immediately. They surrounded the boarding party first, cutting off escape routes with tactical precision that spoke of intelligence far beyond animal cunning. Diana raised her weapon as the creatures began to close the circle, their metallic claws scraping against the deck plating. Whatever these things were, they had turned this massive ship into a tomb. And now the humans were trapped inside with them. Plasma fire lit up the alien ship's corridors like deadly fireworks. Amy's weapon discharged in controlled bursts, each shot finding its mark among the creatures swarming toward them. The beings absorbed the energy blast and kept coming, their metallic claws sparking against the deck as they moved. "They're not going down easy," Amy shouted over the sound of weapons fire. 3 direct hits to center mass should have dropped anything organic, but these creatures barely slowed. Diana backed toward the exit, keeping her weapon trained on the advancing swarm. Up close, the creatures were even more disturbing than they'd first appeared. Their fur rippled with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat made of light. Beneath the organic exterior, metallic components gleamed. Not crude implants, but seamless integration of technology and biology. "Ben, analysis. What are we dealing with?" The scientist fumbled with his scanner while maintaining a steady retreat. "Impossible readings, Captain. They're showing as both organic and artificial simultaneously. The metal components seem to be part of their natural biology, not surgical additions." One of the creatures leaped from a wall, moving faster than anything its size should manage. Rick barely got his weapon up in time, the blast catching the creature mid-flight and sending it tumbling. Instead of staying down, it rolled to its feet and rejoined the advance as if nothing had happened. "These things are built for combat," Rick panted, sweat beading on his forehead despite the environmental suit's cooling system. The creatures didn't attack randomly. They moved like a coordinated unit, some flanking while others provided distraction. When one fell back injured, 2 others immediately covered its retreat. Their intelligence was undeniable and terrifying. "Exits 20 meters, Amy called out, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Stay together, covering fire on my mark." The creatures seemed to sense their intention. The swarm spread wider, trying to cut off the escape route. Their buzzsaw vocalizations grew louder, creating a symphony of mechanical death that echoed through the ship's corridors. Diana's weapon overheated just as they reached the airlock. "Go, go, go." The team rushed through the connection tube linking the ships. Behind them, the creatures pressed forward but stopped at the threshold, as if something prevented them from leaving their vessel. Their glowing eyes watched the humans retreat, intelligence and hunger burning in equal measure. "Seal it," Diana ordered as soon as the last team member cleared the airlock. Emergency protocols engaged, cutting the connection and putting distance between the ships. In the medical bay, Ben worked frantically over tissue samples he'd managed to collect. His hands shook as he prepared slide after slide, each one revealing new impossibilities. "Captain, you need to see this." Ben's voice carried a note of academic excitement mixed with deep unease. Diana leaned over the microscope display, studying the cellular structure Ben had isolated. "What am I looking at?" "Hybrid technology. The organic components are carbon-based, similar to most life we've encountered. But the metallic elements aren't implants, they're grown. These creatures developed alongside their technology, or were developed by it." Amy joined them, her weapon still in hand despite being safely aboard their own ship. "Developed by what?" "Unknown. But the sophistication is beyond anything in our databases. The metal components interface directly with their nervous system, enhancing reaction time, strength, and apparently intelligence. They're not just predators. They're engineered predators. Rick pulled up the ship's sensor readings on a nearby display. Captain, we've got a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up more ships. Lots more. Diana studied the readings with growing alarm. Dozens of ships drifted in the surrounding space, all showing the same dead energy signatures as the vessel they'd just escaped. Some were larger than the first, others smaller, but all bore the same gnawed appearance. It's a graveyard, she whispered. Ben looked up from his samples. No, Captain. It's a feeding ground. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. These creatures hadn't just attacked one ship. They'd been systematically hunting across this region of space, leaving empty hulks in their wake. The question was whether they were still hunting. Communications, can we reach command? Rick worked at his station for several minutes before shaking his head. Something's jamming our long-range transmissions. We can send messages, but they're not getting through. Amy checked her weapon's charge level. How many of those things do you think are on each ship? Based on the biomass required to clean those bones so thoroughly, and factoring in their apparent efficiency. Ben paused, running calculations. Hundreds, maybe thousands per vessel. Diana stared at the graveyard spreading across their view screen. If Ben was right, they were looking at potentially millions of these hybrid predators scattered across dozens of ships. All dormant, waiting for the next meal to arrive. Why didn't they follow us? Rick asked. They seemed pretty eager to turn us into their next snack. Ben adjusted his scanner settings, focusing on the alien vessel. I'm detecting some kind of containment field around each ship. Faint but consistent. It's like they're trapped or... He paused, a new thought forming. Or they're being stored. Stored by what? Before Ben could answer, proximity alarms began blaring throughout their ship. On the main screen, one of the larger vessels in the graveyard was powering up. Energy readings spiked as lights began appearing along its hull. That ship's 3 times our size, Amy observed grimly. Diana felt the familiar weight of command decisions settling on her shoulders. They could run, try to break through the communication jamming and warn the outer colonies, or they could stay and learn more about these creatures before they potentially spread beyond this graveyard. Captain, Ben said quietly, I'm reading movement on multiple ships now. Whatever signal woke up the first group, it's spreading. Through the view screen, they watched as ship after ship began showing signs of activity. The creatures were awakening across the entire graveyard, and something told Diana they wouldn't stay contained much longer. The hunt was about to begin again, and humanity had just announced its presence to millions of the galaxy's most efficient predators. In the cold vacuum of space, the graveyard was coming to life, and the humans were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. Haven Point Station hung in space like a massive metal flower, its docking arms extending in all directions to accommodate vessels from across the galaxy. For 3 days, Diana's ship had pushed its engines beyond safety limits to reach the neutral trading post, and now the familiar bustle of interspecies commerce felt like salvation. The station's main concourse buzzed with activity as beings from a dozen different worlds conducted business, traded information, and shared stories from the far reaches of space. Diana had visited Haven Point many times before, but today the diversity of alien life brought her unusual comfort. After facing those creatures in the graveyard, being surrounded by peaceful civilizations felt like stepping back into sanity. Captain Ross, a familiar voice called across the crowded promenade. Commander Voss of the Alterian Trade Consortium approached with his characteristic measured gait. His tall, blue-skinned frame towered over most of the other beings in the area, and his forearms gestured in the complex patterns his people used for emphasis. Commander Voss, good to see you. Diana shook the offered hand with genuine warmth. I need to speak with the station's Xenobiological Council. Emergency priority. Voss's large eyes studied her carefully. You appear distressed, Captain. What have you encountered in the outer sectors? Within an hour, Diana found herself in Haven Point's council chambers facing representatives from 12 different species. She'd uploaded her team's sensor readings and biological samples to the station's main computer. Expecting the usual academic discussion about unknown life forms, instead, she watched 12 different species all exhibit the same reaction: pure, undiluted terror. The Zephyrian representative, a insectoid being whose compound eyes normally showed calm intelligence, began making rapid clicking sounds that Ben's translator identified as panic signals. The Corvin delegate, whose rock-like exterior usually conveyed stoic strength, actually stepped backward from the display showing the creatures. "You encountered the Devourers," whispered Elder Morim of the Centauri Republic. His ancient voice carried the weight of species memory stretching back millennia. "We thought them extinct." Diana leaned forward. "You know these creatures?" "Know them." The Alterian counselor's forehands trembled as he accessed his people's historical archives. "Every civilization in this galaxy knows of the Devourers. They are the ending of worlds, the silence that follows screaming, the hunger that cannot be satisfied." Ben pulled up his tricorder readings. "According to my analysis, they're partially cybernetic, but the integration is seamless, almost like they evolved alongside technology." Elder Morim nodded gravely. "They did not evolve, young human. They were created. During the height of the Kashari Empire, 50,000 years ago, the galaxy was united under one rule. The Kashari sought to create the perfect weapon, a living tool that could strip enemy worlds of all resistance. They succeeded too well," added the Corvin delegate, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "The Devourers consumed the Kashari worlds as efficiently as they consumed their enemies. Within a generation, the greatest empire in galactic history was nothing but picked bones and empty ships." Diana felt ice forming in her stomach. "How many worlds did they destroy?" 17,000 inhabited systems, Elder Morim replied. "Entire species wiped from existence. Worlds stripped so bare that even the bacteria died." Amy, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "How were they finally stopped?" The council chamber fell silent. The representatives exchanged glances that spoke of racial trauma so deep it had become genetic memory. They were not stopped. The Zephyrian finally clicked out. They simply disappeared. One day they were consuming everything in their path. The next they were gone. Some believe they consumed themselves when no other food remained. Others think they returned to whatever dark corner of space spawned them. Ben studied the historical data flowing across his display. These records indicate they always appeared after major conflicts, almost like they were attracted to warfare and destruction. "Indeed," Elder Morim confirmed. "We called them scavengers in the old tongue, for they fed on the aftermath of chaos. But the hunger never ended. After consuming the dead, they would turn on the living." Diana processed this information with growing alarm. "What about their technology? The cybernetic components?" "Unknown origin. Some scholars believe the Kashari found them already partially mechanical. Others theorize they were once a peaceful species transformed by an ancient artificial intelligence. The truth died with their creators." Rick, monitoring communications from their ship, burst into the chamber. "Captain, I'm receiving emergency signals from 3 human colonies. Theta 7 sector." The blood drained from Diana's face. "Which colonies?" "New Geneva, Horizon's End, and Prosperity Station. All went dark within the last 6 hours. The alien representatives began backing away from the humans, their universal fear, overriding diplomatic protocol." "You led them to populated systems?" The Corvin's voice carried accusation and terror in equal measure. "We didn't lead them anywhere," Amy protested. "We barely escaped with our lives." Elder Morim accessed his console with shaking fingers. "The Devourers do not simply hunt randomly. They follow specific patterns, seeking the greatest concentrations of biomass. If they have awakened in Theta 7, they will spread through all human space within weeks." Diana stood abruptly. "We have to warn Earth Command. Evacuate the outer colonies." "Evacuation?" The Zephyrian's compound eyes focused on her with something resembling pity. "Captain Ross, you do not understand. When the Devourers hunt, there is no escape. They strip worlds faster than any evacuation could proceed. They turn civilizations to bone dust before help can arrive." "Then what do you suggest?" Diana's voice carried the edge of command authority, even in this room full of beings whose species were older than human civilization. The silence stretched uncomfortably long before Elder Morim spoke. "We suggest, Captain, that humanity prepare for extinction. The Devourers have awakened, and history tells us that nothing survives their hunger." "There is one possibility," the Alterian counselor said quietly. "The old records speak of a single species that once faced the Devourers and survived." "Which species?" Ben asked eagerly. "Unknown. The records are fragmentary, corrupted by time. All we know is that they found a way to turn the Devourers' own nature against them. But they paid a terrible price for victory." Diana stood, her decision made. "Commander Voss, I need to requisition emergency supplies and ammunition. Full military loadout. Captain, Elder Morim's ancient voice carried genuine concern. You cannot seriously intend to fight them. Every species in this chamber represents millions of years of evolution, and we all fear the devourers. Diana met his gaze steadily. With respect, Elder, your species survived by running. Humans have never been good at running from fights. As the council session dissolved into chaos with representatives rushing to evacuate the sector, Diana gathered her team. The weight of species survival settled on her shoulders, but she'd faced impossible odds before. The difference was that this time, even their allies thought humanity was doomed. The workshop aboard the Frontier's Edge hummed with activity that would have seemed impossible 3 weeks ago. Where once pristine research labs had conducted peaceful xenobiology studies, now every surface was covered with weapon modifications, armor plating, and jury-rigged devices that defied standard engineering protocols. Ben wiped grease from his hands as he examined the latest prototype. The frequency modulator should disrupt their cybernetic components without affecting their organic systems. In theory, Diana tested the weight of the modified plasma rifle, its barrel now fitted with Ben's harmonic disruption array. In theory being the key phrase. How many theories have we burned through this week? 17, Rick called from across the room where he was spot welding additional armor plates to their environmental suits. But the last 3 actually worked. Amy emerged from the weapons locker carrying an armload of modified ammunition. The bio-trackers in these rounds should help us monitor their movement patterns. If we can predict how they coordinate attacks, we might actually have a chance. 3 weeks of non-stop work had transformed Diana's exploration vessel into something between a research station and a military fortress. Every spare moment had been spent analyzing the tissue samples Ben collected, studying their behavioral patterns, and developing countermeasures that conventional military thinking said were impossible. Captain, Ben said, pulling up his latest analysis on the main display, I think I've found their weakness. Diana gathered the team around Ben's workstation. The display showed a complex 3-dimensional model of the creature's cybernetic neural network. The metal components aren't just enhancement, Ben explained, highlighting specific connection points. They're control systems. Look at these neural pathways. They're being artificially reinforced and directed by the cybernetic elements. Amy studied the model carefully. You're saying they're being controlled? More than that. I think they're being compelled. The organic brain shows signs of constant stress and conflict with the artificial components. It's like they're fighting an internal war every moment they're conscious. Rick leaned closer to the display. Can we exploit that somehow? Ben nodded excitedly. The cybernetic network operates on specific frequencies. If we can generate the right harmonic disruption, we might be able to sever the connection between organic and artificial components. What happens to them then? Diana asked, unknown. They might die, they might go dormant, or... Ben paused, considering possibilities. They might revert to their original nature, whatever that was before the cybernetic modification. Diana considered the implications. 3 weeks ago, she'd been running from these creatures like every other species in the galaxy. Now her team was discussing ways to free them from technological slavery. It was a distinctly human approach to an impossible problem. How close are we to testing this theory? I need more data. Real-time readings from their neural networks during active states. Amy raised an eyebrow. You want to get close enough to scan their brains while they're trying to eat us? That's exactly what I want to do. Diana smiled grimly. Then we're going back to the graveyard. 2 days later, the Frontier's Edge approached the ship graveyard with modifications that would have horrified its original designers. Additional armor plating covered critical systems. Weapon ports had been cut through hull sections never intended for military use, and the cargo bay had been converted into a mobile laboratory surrounded by defensive barriers. Sensor readings show increased activity across multiple vessels, Rick reported. Whatever woke them up last time, they're definitely not sleeping anymore. Diana studied the tactical display. Ben, are your scanners ready? Active neural monitoring is online. I'll need to get within 500 meters of a live specimen. Amy checked her modified weapons array. I can provide that, but not for long. These things learn fast. They've probably adapted to our previous tactics. The plan was ambitious even by human standards. Instead of avoiding the creatures, they would deliberately provoke an attack while maintaining precise range and positioning to gather the data Ben needed. It required split-second timing, Perfect coordination and more than a little luck. Approaching target vessel, Rick announced. Same configuration as before, but I'm reading higher energy levels throughout their systems. The creatures responded faster this time. Within minutes of their approach, swarms began emerging from ventilation systems and hull breaches. But instead of the chaotic assault Diana expected, the attack showed disturbing organization and tactical sophistication. They're using formation tactics, Amy observed, tracking multiple groups on her display. Delta formations for penetration attacks covering fire positions, even what looks like reserve units. Ben, are you getting readings? Yes, and it's fascinating. Their neural activity spikes dramatically during combat, but the patterns are artificial. The cybernetic components are forcing specific response patterns. Diana watched the creature's assault patterns evolve in real time. They're learning from our movements, adapting faster than any natural evolution should allow. That's the cybernetic enhancement. They're sharing tactical data across the entire swarm network. Ben's excitement was evident despite their dangerous situation. Captain, I'm reading massive conflict indicators in their organic neural tissue. The biological components are fighting the cybernetic compulsion. Amy's defensive fire created a buffer zone around their ship, but the creatures kept adapting to her tactics. Whatever you're going to do, Ben, do it fast. They're developing countermeasures to our weapons modifications. Just a few more minutes. I need complete neural mapping during peak stress responses. Rick jinked the ship through a complex evasion pattern as more creatures poured from nearby vessels. Peak stress? I think we're there. Diana watched the swarm coordination with growing understanding. These creatures weren't just predators. They were strategic thinkers being forced into mindless aggression by their cybernetic components. Every tactical brilliance was immediately countered by compulsive attack patterns that made no sense. Got it, Ben announced. Full neural mapping complete. Captain, you need to see this. The display showed the creature's brain activity in real time. The organic components showed signs of intelligence, creativity, even what appeared to be distress. But the cybernetic elements overrode every thought with aggressive imperatives. They're not monsters, Diana realized. They're prisoners. Amy continued her defensive fire as they pulled away from the graveyard. Prisoners or not, they're still trying to kill us. Because they have no choice, Ben replied. The cybernetic components won't let them stop. They're trapped in an endless cycle of hunt and consume. Diana studied the data as they reached safe distance. Her team had accomplished something no other species had managed in 50,000 years. They'd looked beyond the horror to understand the underlying tragedy. The creatures that terrorized the galaxy were victims of their own technology, or someone else's. Ben, can we build a device to disrupt their cybernetic network on a large scale? Possibly. But Captain, if I'm right about what happens when we free them from cybernetic control... What? Ben pulled up comparative analysis of the creature's neural structures. Their organic intelligence levels are off the charts. If we free them, we might be unleashing something more dangerous than the controlled version. Diana considered the implications. They could try to destroy the creatures like every other species had attempted. Or they could try something typically human, setting them free and hoping for the best. Start building the device, Ben. Sometimes the greatest risks lead to the greatest rewards, Amy shook her head. Only humans would try to solve a galaxy-spanning threat by making it potentially worse. That's what makes us human, Diana replied with a smile that was equal parts confidence and madness. The device Ben built looked like it belonged in a mad scientist's laboratory, rather than aboard a starship. Crystalline components salvaged from their own navigation systems fed into modified communication arrays, all powered by their ship's main reactor pushed well beyond safety specifications. One mistake and the entire thing would either do nothing or blow a hole through 3 decks. Theoretical range is approximately 10,000 kilometers, Ben explained to the assembled team. But I have to deploy it from inside the graveyard for maximum effect. The signal needs to penetrate multiple ship hulls to reach all the cybernetic networks simultaneously. Diana studied the tactical display showing their target, the largest vessel in the graveyard, a massive construct that dwarfed even their inflated estimates. Recent scans suggested it housed not just creatures but the central coordination hub for the entire swarm network. How long do you need once we're in position? 5 minutes to calibrate the frequency modulation, maybe 10 if their network adapts to the initial signal. Amy checked her weapons array one final time. 10 minutes inside that graveyard with every creature in the sector converging on us. This is officially the worst plan we've ever attempted. Rick looked up from his pilot controls, grinning despite the obvious danger. Also the most interesting plan we've ever attempted. Diana felt the familiar weight of command decisions, but this one carried implications beyond her ship or crew. Success might free an enslaved species and end a galactic threat. Failure would add their bones to the countless others scattered through these dead ships. Earth Command response to our proposal? She asked Rick. Admiral Chen's exact words were absolutely not. Return to base immediately for psychiatric evaluation. And the other human colonies? Mixed responses. 3 colonies voted to evacuate immediately. 5 colonies voted to support our mission with whatever resources they can spare. Diana nodded. Humans were nothing if not predictable in their unpredictability. When faced with impossible odds, roughly half would retreat, while the other half would charge ahead with whatever weapons they could improvise. Incoming. Message from the Defiant, Rick announced. The main screen showed Captain Martinez of the colony ship from New Barcelona. Diana, you magnificent lunatic, we're in position and ready to provide covering fire. Amy pulled up sensor readings showing 4 additional human vessels taking positions around the graveyard perimeter. The cavalry actually came. Did you expect anything less? Diana asked. We're about to attempt something that every other species in the galaxy thinks is impossible. Of course, other humans want to help. Ben made final adjustments to his device, his hands steadier than they had any right to be. Device is ready. Warning, if this works, we have no idea what we're releasing. The creature's organic intelligence appears far superior to their cybernetic-controlled state. Will they still be hostile? Unknown. We're about to find out what 50,000 years of cybernetic slavery does to a species' fundamental nature. Diana gave the order that would either save or doom them all. Take us in. The frontier's edge plunged into the graveyard like a minnow swimming into a school of sharks. Within minutes, creatures began pouring from every vessel, their coordination more sophisticated than ever. The swarm had learned from their previous encounters, adapting tactics with frightening efficiency. Multiple attack vectors, Amy reported, her defensive fire lighting up space around them. They're using the derelict ships as cover, approaching from dead zones in our sensor array. Rick's piloting pushed their modified ship through maneuvers that violated several laws of physics and probably a few laws of engineering. Approaching primary target. Ben, hope your device works better than it looks. The largest vessel loomed before them, its hull surface crawling with creatures using magnetic grips to cling to the exterior. As they watched, more creatures began launching themselves through space using built-in thrusters Diana hadn't noticed before. They can survive in vacuum, she realized. This isn't just ship-to-ship combat anymore. Amy's weapons array worked overtime, creating a defensive perimeter as creatures swarmed through open space around them. Ben, whatever you're going to do now would be good. Deploying device. Signal strength building. Ben's voice carried the intensity of a man trying to save or damn the galaxy. Neural network mapping in progress. Captain, the coordination between ships is incredible. They're functioning as a single organism across hundreds of vessels. The attack intensified as more creatures joined the assault. Their tactics showed evolution in real time, with new formations developing to counter each defensive measure Amy employed. It was like fighting an enemy that learned faster than they could adapt. Signal at 50% strength, Ben announced, reading massive feedback from their cybernetic networks. The neural conflict is intensifying. Diana watched creatures beginning to move erratically, some stopping mid-attack as if confused. Others continued their assault with mechanical precision, but something in their coordination was breaking down. 75% signal strength. Captain, I'm reading neural pathway disruption across multiple vessels. The cybernetic components are losing control of organic brain functions. Amy's defensive fire found easier targets as creatures began losing their tactical coordination. They're fighting each other. Some are still attacking us. Others are attacking the cybernetic components on their own bodies. Signal at full strength, Ben shouted over the sound of systems straining beyond their limits. Massive neural cascade across the entire network. The cybernetic control matrix is collapsing. The change was immediate and terrifying. Creatures throughout the graveyard stopped their coordinated assault and began tearing at their own cybernetic components with desperate fury. The organized swarm dissolved into chaos as artificial intelligence lost its grip on organic minds. Ben, shut it down before we lose main power. The signal ceased, leaving an eerie silence across the graveyard. Creatures floated motionless in space, some still clinging to ship hulls, others drifting free. For several minutes, nothing moved. Then slowly, the creatures began to stir. But their movements were different, less aggressive, more cautious. Several approached the human ships but made no attempt to attack. Instead, they seemed to be studying their former targets with what could only be described as curiosity. "Captain," Ben whispered, his voice filled with awe, "I'm reading completely different neural patterns. The organic components are functioning independently for the first time in millennia." One creature, larger than the others, approached their ship and pressed what appeared to be a communication device against their hull. Through their speakers came a sound they'd never heard before. Not the mechanical buzzsaw screech of cybernetic compulsion, but something that sounded almost like music. Diana stared at the display showing hundreds of creatures throughout the graveyard, all moving with newfound purpose and intelligence. "Ben, what have we done?" "I think, Captain, we've just introduced the galaxy to its oldest and most feared species in their natural state. And judging by their neural patterns, they're far more intelligent than we imagined." The creature at their hull continued its musical communication, and Ben worked frantically to decode the complex harmonics. After several minutes, his translation program produced words that sent chills through the entire crew. "Thank you." The creature floating outside their view screen was beautiful in a way that made Diana's breath catch. Without the cybernetic compulsion driving them to violence, their natural form showed graceful intelligence. Bioluminescent patterns flowed across their fur in complex sequences that Ben's computers identified as advanced mathematical concepts. "They're not trying to communicate," Ben said, his voice filled with wonder. "They're teaching us. Those light patterns contain algorithms more sophisticated than our best quantum computers." Amy lowered her weapons, though her training kept her ready for action. "Are you sure they're not hostile anymore?" The large creature that had approached their ship moved with fluid grace, gesturing toward the massive vessel at the graveyard's center. More creatures emerged from various ships, but instead of the chaotic swarms they'd faced before, these moved in organized groups with clear purpose. "Captain," Rick called from his communication station, "I'm receiving data streams from multiple sources. They're sending us technical specifications, engineering diagrams. I can't make sense of most of it." Ben worked frantically at his analysis station, trying to process the flood of information. "They're sharing their technology with us freely. These schematics show power generation, methods that violate half the laws of physics we thought we understood." Diana watched as creatures throughout the graveyard began, dismantling the cybernetic components that had controlled them for millennia. They worked with precise efficiency, removing artificial elements and casting them into space like discarded chains. "Translation matrix is stabilizing," Ben announced. "I'm getting clearer communication protocols." The musical tones from the lead creature resolved into words through their speakers. The voice that emerged was ancient beyond measure, carrying the weight of civilizations lost to time. "Children of Earth, you have freed us from the long sleep. We are the gardeners, first among the thinking species, makers of life and tenders of worlds." Diana felt a chill run down her spine. "Gardeners? Before your sun learned to burn, we seeded worlds with life. We guided the first steps of consciousness across the galaxy. We built the great civilizations and watched them grow beyond our wildest hopes." Ben's readings showed massive energy buildups throughout the graveyard as the freed creatures activated technologies that had lain dormant for 50,000 years. "Captain, the power levels they're generating are astronomical. They could destroy solar systems with this technology." The ancient voice continued, carrying notes of profound sadness. "The Kashari found us during our contemplation, when we had withdrawn from active guidance to allow younger species their own growth. They saw our technology and sought to enslave us as weapons for their empire." Amy studied the tactical displays with growing amazement. "They're not preparing weapons. They're building something else entirely." Through the view screen, they watched as creatures from dozens of ships began assembling a structure in space. The construction defied conventional engineering, with components that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The cybernetic control systems forced us to destroy what we had spent eons creating. We became devourers of the very life we had fostered. For 50,000 years, we have been trapped in a nightmare of consuming our own children. Diana felt the full weight of what her species had accomplished. They hadn't just defeated a galactic threat, they had freed the galaxy's gardeners from technological slavery. What happens now? Now, young humans, we face a choice that will determine the fate of all thinking life. The structure taking shape outside their ship began to glow with energies that hurt to look at directly. Rick's instruments went wild as space itself seemed to bend around the construction. The Kashari Empire fell, but their greatest creation survived. The master intelligence that designed our cybernetic chain still exists, waiting in the dark spaces between galaxies. It will return when it senses our freedom. Ben looked up from his readings, his face pale. Captain, they're building a gateway. Something that will let them travel faster than light. But the energy requirements are impossible by our understanding, the ancient voice confirmed. We must leave this galaxy before the master intelligence returns. Our presence here endangers every species that has grown in our absence. Amy studied the readings with professional interest. You're talking about abandoning the entire galaxy? Not abandoning, protecting. The master intelligence seeks to rebuild its empire using enslaved consciousness. As long as we remain, every thinking species is at risk of cybernetic conversion. Diana watched as more gardeners joined the construction effort. Their movements showed technology so advanced it appeared magical, manipulating matter and energy with casual ease that made human science look like children playing with blocks. But before we depart, the voice continued, we offer gifts to the species that freed us. Knowledge to heal worlds, technology to reach the stars, wisdom to avoid the mistakes that led to our enslavement. Data streams flooded their computers as the gardeners shared the accumulated knowledge of the galaxy's first civilization. Medical techniques that could extend human life by centuries, engineering principles that made faster-than-light travel routine, agricultural methods that could terraform dead worlds in decades rather than millennia. Ben stared at the information cascade with the expression of a man drinking from a fire hose. Captain, this knowledge will advance human civilization by thousands of years. They're giving us everything. Not everything, the ancient voice corrected gently. We withhold the technologies of consciousness manipulation and artificial intelligence beyond certain parameters. These gifts have proven too dangerous for any species to possess. The gateway construction neared completion, and Diana could feel reality itself straining around the massive structure. Even through their ship's shielding, the energies involved made her hair stand on end. Why us? Diana asked. Why did humans succeed where every other species failed? The pause before the answer carried the weight of ages. Every other species looked at us and saw only monsters to be destroyed or threats to be avoided. Humans looked at us and saw prisoners to be freed. This difference in perspective changed everything. Amy shook her head in amazement. We didn't defeat them. We liberated them. You saw beyond fear to understanding, beyond destruction to redemption. This is why we believe humanity will guide the galaxy well in our absence. The gateway activated with a sound like reality tearing. Through its aperture, Diana glimpsed star patterns that belonged to no galaxy she recognized. The gardeners began moving toward their escape route, but many paused to acknowledge the human ships with gestures that needed no translation. Will we see you again? Diana asked. Perhaps when your species has grown wise enough to stand as equals rather than children, when you no longer need gardeners to tend your growth. As the last of the gardeners passed through the gateway, the ancient voice spoke final words that would echo through human history. Guard the galaxy well, children of Earth. You are its protectors now. The gateway collapsed, leaving empty space where the graveyard had floated. All that remained were the human ships and the impossible technologies the gardeners had shared. Diana stared at the empty space, feeling the weight of galactic responsibility settling on humanity's shoulders. They had sought to explore the unknown and instead inherited stewardship of all known life. Captain, Ben said quietly, even humans stepped back when they showed us what they really were. Diana smiled, understanding flooding through her. The title hadn't referred to human fear. It referred to human respect. When the galaxy's gardeners revealed their true nature and power, even humanity's characteristic boldness had given way to awe. Set course for Earth, she ordered. We have some explaining to do. As the frontier's edge turned toward home, carrying knowledge that would reshape human civilization, Diana couldn't help but wonder if they were ready for the responsibility the gardeners had placed upon them. Behind them, Space held only stars and the echo of ancient wisdom. Ahead lay a future where humanity would either rise to become worthy guardians of galactic life, or fall to the same hubris that had doomed the Kashari Empire. The universe held its breath and waited to see which path the children of Earth would choose.